So I'm here with another book haul, but specifically I'm here to share with you all the books that I bought myself since Christmas. I've been holding off showing you these books for various reasons, and it's finally time to come clean. As I've discussed, I'm trying as hard as I can to keep my TBR close to zero, and so some of these books I've already read, and for the ones that I haven't, well, they're probably going to show up on a coming soon summer TBR. All that being said, let's get started. Alright, let's start by talking about Babel by R.F. Kuang, which is a book that I got from the Book of the Month Club. And don't worry, I'm probably the only booktuber online who is not doing this as a sponsored video. They've never reached out to me, which is probably okay because I do shy away from sponsored content. But I picked up this myself because they're now shipping to Canada. And they had a really great deal. So the first book you got from them was only $10, and that included shipping. I thought it was a steal of a deal. I could not get this book cheaper anywhere, and I absolutely loved it. It's a book I read and loved last year, which is a standalone book that is almost a reaction to Dark Academia. It deals with translation. It's a lighter fantasy story that is more based around colonialism and has an interesting conversation about translation. I loved it so much. R.F. Kuang is definitely one of my favorite authors. I also may have bought the audiobook, which I try not to do when I actually buy a book in multiple formats. Tell me if I'm not the only one who does this. When you really love a book, you just want to buy all the copies of it, even if it doesn't entirely make sense. But given how gorgeous this edition is, again, I really thought I got a good deal, and it was Christmas and I kind of wanted to treat myself, so I don't feel too bad about it. Then also over Christmas, I put in a book outlet order, and if you don't know the website, I'm going to have a link down below because I do have a discount on your first order, but I will warn you that this website is fantastic, but it's also super dangerous. I've spent a lot of money there in the past, and now I try to be really careful. So typically I allow myself to do an order about once a year, so if I'm doing it right, you probably won't see another book outlet haul for me until next Christmas. But the reason I put in an order specifically is that they had a copy of The Swarm, which of course is a translated science fiction apocalyptic novel that I've been gushing about. It deals with climate change in a really exciting and thoughtful way, and I just inhaled the ebook that I read, and I desperately wanted my own copy of it. And I do try to collect my favorites because I do reread books. Even though this one is really long, I would love to read it sometime this year. And so I was really excited to see a copy at a good discounted price. And of course, how they get you a book outlet is that you have to spend a certain amount of money in order to get free shipping. And so of course I did what we all do. And so I looked around the website and found more books to stick into my cart. So I also got a copy of A Heart Divided, which is the fourth and final book in the series that starts with A Hero Born. I do own the first three. I've read the whole series and really like it. So I do think this is a good purchase here. Again, I've already read it, so it's one that's going to be on my shelf for when I'm ready for a reread. And I also got a copy of Master of Poisons, which is a standalone fantasy that I read and loved last year. I will admit it has really complex world building, and so it is one I really want to revisit so I could get fully immersed in the world and really understand it more. And so I thought this was a great deal because again, it's one I definitely see myself rereading, hopefully very soon. And I was excited to find a copy of XX, which is a multimedia format science fiction novel, one again that made my best of the year list. And this is a really cool story because it's a first context story, but it deals with typography and fonts, and it's so unique. You definitely want to have a physical copy because there's a lot of images and different fonts used throughout the story. It's a very long book, it's very taxing, and I loved it so much. Even though it was a lot of work to get through, it was good work. And so definitely this is the kind of book that I thought was well worth my time actually owning a copy of. And again, you can imagine it's pretty expensive to get new. I think I had it on my Amazon wish list, but it was like $45 or something. So I got this one at a much better price, I think maybe like $15, $14, and was really happy to check that out. Then I still had to fill up my cart, so I picked up a copy of City of Lies by Sam Hawkes, which is a book that is the start of an epic fantasy series that involves people who work with poisons, and there's also some neurodiversity or characters that struggle with different forms of anxiety and so forth within this narrative. And so it's actually a book I've read before and I liked, but I'll be honest, I didn't love it. But when you're trying to fill up your cart, I decided that I really want to give it another try because I do love a lot of things about this book. And so I just want to see if I love it even more if I read it in a different time. And again, like, dealing with poisons is really cool. I love diverse representation of different people with different backgrounds, and yeah, it's one that I really want to love, and I'll be honest, this copy was really cheap. And finally, I added one more book to the list, and this is the only book I had not read at the time of the order, and I still have not read it, but I really want to get a copy of it, and so that was Dune Messiah, which is the second book in the original Dune series, and I've read the first book, and so I want to continue on and collect the other copies. However, tell me if I'm the only only one who's done this, where you order the copy and you don't pay attention to the format, because I have book 2 and I already own book 1. I think it was a gift from a subscriber. And look at this. One's mass market paperback and one is the trade paperback. And I always say that I'm not someone who cares about having the same editions, but I might have to change that. This is kind of bugging me. So my problem is I don't know if I should get book 3 in this size or in this size, and then do I have to rebuy the middle book regardless? So I don't know. Help me out. Give me your thoughts down below if you've ever done this, and what do? Do you buy the book again, or do you just suck it up to bad planning? And continuing on with more books I bought myself, I also went to the used bookstore actually the day that I'm filming this, and I turned in some books that I no longer want to read and own. So using that store credit, I was able to buy a few more books without actually spending my own money, and so that's always a good feeling. The first book I got is a bit of an outlier. It's not something I normally talk about on my channel, but I do read occasionally a little bit of historical fiction, and so I got Wolf of the Plains, which is the first book in a series that is historical fiction but is based loosely on the life of Genghis Khan. And this one especially is the first book, which is more of a coming of age of how he grew into the man he was. And I've been fascinated by him as a person. I've read nonfiction about his life and would love to kind of spend more time learning about Mongolian culture. So this is one I checked out. It was very cheap. I think it was $5.50 using store credit again. So I thought I'd give it a try and hopefully read it over the summer. Next, as I mentioned, I really liked to own the books that I love so that I can reread them. And so if you watched my list of my top 10 favorite dark backlist books, you shouldn't be surprised that yes, I bought myself a copy of Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. I really adore Atwood, so I would like to collect more of her books. This again is one that I probably shouldn't have done because I do own the audiobook as well. It went on sale on Audible, which is how I actually read the book the first time. But I like to think that I want to go back and forth between the two formats next time I read it, because it's a book with so much detail in it that I really want to be able to spend time with the story and just be able to go back and kind of easily read pages again and again. And last, from that used bookstore, I got the first 2 books in the Magician's trilogy by Lev Grossman. So I got The Magicians and then The Magician's King. So I'm going to be keeping my eye out for Magician's Land to round it out. And this is a series I'm going to talk more about soon because I've already filmed my summer TBR, but it's coming after this video because I film out of order. I'm a crazy person. And so of course, this is a story that follows a man named Quentin who finds out that magic is real and goes off to school. It's a series that I really have wanted to return back to, and I think I'm going to absolutely love it once I read the whole thing through. So I was very pleased to get the first 2 books, and again, I can't wait to finish it out. And I'll be talking more about it this summer and in my next TBR, so stay tuned for that. And I mentioned that I actually went to that used bookstore today, the day I'm filming this, and it's funny because I actually tried to go to the used bookstore about a week ago. However, my son told me that we didn't need to go to the bookstore because we already own books, and we should just stay home and read the books we already own. My jaw dropped on the floor. I was both proud of him and devastated all at the same time. However, this time I made him go to the bookstore with me because I really wanted to go, and thankfully we found a book of Peppa Pig short stories, which are his absolute favorite. So I think I won him over, and I think he understands the glory of the bookstore. So let me know if anyone else has experiences similar to that. Next, let's talk about books that I've received as gifts, and as always, I do like to mention I do have an Amazon wish list, so that if you ever feel inspired to flip a coin to your booktuber, as well as my Patreon, honestly, sending me books is my favorite way to get a thank you for the channel. And so I was really surprised when out of the blue, with no message attached, this book came in the mail, The Veiled Throne, which is the 3rd book in the Dandelion Quartet. I own the first 2, which is why the 3rd was on my list. And this is a chunky book. I don't think it was very cheap, and I really appreciate it because I love, if you can't tell from this video, Asian-inspired fantasy. It's one of my favorite series, and I've always wanted to go and finish out rereading it because I've never actually given you all a final review of the series as a whole. And so I received this book, and then because there was no note attached, I sent a message on Twitter and Instagram just thanking the person and just saying thank you so much. I can't wait to get to this book and then hopefully get the other book later. And so this book showed up in the mail, and then a couple weeks later the final book showed up in the mail, and again there was no note attached. So once again, I don't know if the person who sent me book 3 is the same person who sent me book 4, or if there was a second generous person involved because they saw my Twitter message. So whoever you are, thank you so much. This is incredibly generous. I will be coming back with a proper full review of this series this summer as I finish out the final books and try to put together some thoughts. And again, this is incredibly generous. I appreciate it so much. It really made my day. And if you want to identify yourself in the comments, I can thank you properly because this really does mean a lot. Thank you. Next, let's talk about horror and thriller books that I received for review, starting with Episode 13 by Craig DeLuey. This is a book that came from Orbit, and I've already reviewed it. Essentially, it follows individuals who are going into a supposedly haunted house, but they're doing it as part of a reality TV show. This book definitely gave me a head full of ghost vibes, and so if you love when horror is matched up with reality TV, this one was excellent. The only thing I didn't love about it is the fact that it's a haunted house story, which, if you don't know, is not my favorite genre, but the fact that I loved it that much really speaks to how well it was done. So if you do enjoy haunted house stories, I think this is one of the best new releases that come out this year in that genre. And next, I have to once again gush about Death of a Dancing Queen, which is a book that came out by a new crime imprint called Datura Books, which is a sister imprint of Angry Robot Books, a sci-fi and fantasy label that I love. And this, of course, follows a young woman named Billy who works as a private investigator. And in this first book, she is trying to figure out what happened to a woman who apparently has gone missing. I soaked it up. I loved it so much. It definitely gave me Veronica Mars vibes, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It was so much fun, and I really think if you share my taste for amateur detectives, you'll love this one too. Next, I want to talk about Mayfair Fly, which is a book that is set in LA and follows an actress who decides to take on a new persona in order to get roles, and she takes inspiration from American Psycho. It sounds amazing. I am really excited for this one. It is coming out in June, so you will hear my thoughts for it then. Next is The Boys of the Valley by Philip Fracassi, and this is a book by an author I've read a couple times this year. I really enjoyed A Child Alone Among Strangers. I know I keep messing up the title. People have told me in the comments. I know, I'm terrible at titles. But I really want to check out this one, which I believe follows an orphanage for boys, and possibly someone gets possessed or haunted, and this book is coming out in July, and I'm really excited. I've heard some really good buzz. I think this book might already be out in the UK, or the UK reviewers are just reading it early, because I've heard good things, and I'm so excited to experience it myself. And finally, for this category, I want to mention that I got a copy of So Close by Sylvia Day, and this is a book that I intended to review, but I will be fully honest, I started reading it and I did not enjoy it, and I did give myself a very rare permission to put aside a book rather than force myself through just to give you all a review. Basically, this is a story that follows individuals. It's supposed to be kind of an erotic thriller, which I think is what appealed to me because I really do love erotic thrillers, or at least I think I do. But this one just rubbed me all the wrong way. I just don't think Sylvia Day is for me. She's kind of a certain type of author and a certain type of like best-selling author that I don't think really is up my alley. And so this was just a mistake. I shouldn't have requested or accepted it for review, and I'll definitely be more mindful of it in the future. Next, let's talk about science fiction review copies, starting with Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky, as well as its sequels. We have Children of Ruin, and then also the newer book, Children of Memory, all from Orbit Books. I've already reviewed these ones, so check out my review video if you haven't yet. Also from Orbit, I received a copy of Affinity Gate by M.R. Carey. This is one that unfortunately I did not love. It is multiverse fiction that sounded perfect on paper, and I just didn't end up connecting with it very much. I don't have much else to say about it. Again, I've reviewed it if you want to check out my further thoughts, but a little disappointed. Beautiful cover though. Also, I have a copy of Flight and Anchor, which is a Firebreak story by Nicole Connor Stace. And this is one that I have not reviewed yet, but I will be doing soon because it's coming out in June. As I mentioned, it's a book that's set in the Firebreak universe, so I'm gonna see if I can get a copy of Firebreak first. I think that Scribd has the audio for it, so I'm hoping to read it first, but the marketers and publishers do promise that I can actually read this even without reading the other book, but I do like to be a completionist and read things in order if at all possible. All I know is that it is a VR story, and I've heard good things about the original book, and so I'm hoping I'll love this standalone or jumping off novella as well. Next, I'm incredibly grateful to receive a copy of Bile and Blood by Catherine Franklin. This is a book I already reviewed and really enjoyed. It's the second book in epic space opera series, and the first book is where you want to start, which is Empyrean. And in this series, we follow those that have empiric abilities, and so while it's a science fiction book, it definitely has kind of psychic fantasy-ish style to it, and I really enjoyed getting to continue on with the series. The author was really nice and sent me this nice postcard with a nice note attached to it, and just really enjoyed it. I do, again, appreciate she's UK based, and of course it's probably pretty expensive to ship off to Canada, but definitely well worth it from my perspective because I loved it. Even though the UK post office is doing things, this book eventually arrived and it was so worth the wait. And finally, for science fiction, I could not be more grateful to receive a copy of The Automaton by Ian Young. And this is a book that I previously read as an ebook and loved it so much that I immediately regretted not requesting a physical copy of it. So instead, said, I put it on my Amazon wish list and waited patiently. And then the author ended up reaching out and offering to actually send a copy. And so even though I've already read this book, they sent it along, and I think that's great because it saves me a lot in editing when it comes to having to put the image of the book up, because I'm just gonna say right here that I love this book a lot, and chances are it's gonna show up in some more recommendation videos. And if you don't know, this is a story that is set in a future where humanity is dying off, and so they build these automatons to continue on. And then the story actually jumps forward 5,000 years, and we follow this automaton who is waking up, and the story goes from there. I love it so much, and I'm definitely going to be talking about it again, so thank you again. And now let's talk fancy review copies, starting with The Tyranny of Faith by Richard Swan. And this is another book that I received from Orbit. It's the second book, the first one being The Justice of Kings. Love this book so much. It follows a man who serves as the justice of the land, and the story is told from the perspective of his scribe. And you definitely want to start at the beginning, but oh my goodness, book 2 is possibly even better. I will once again be talking about this book in future videos, so stay tuned for that. And also from Orbit, I received a copy of We Dream of Gods by Devin Madsen. And this is a piece of epic fantasy. It's the fourth and final book in the quartet. And while I've already reviewed it, definitely go check out that video. But I just want to point out that these covers are absolutely gorgeous. They're probably some of my favorite artwork that I've seen from Orbit. So if you are a cover buyer, this is one that you might want to check out for yourself. Again, from Orbit, I also got a copy of The Sapphire Altar by David Deglish, and this is the second book in the series. I read the first book, really enjoyed it last year, and this is a piece of revenge fantasy, and I was really pleased to continue on with this one, so that is that. And I also want to talk once again about The Way Home by Peter S. Beagle. This again is a collection of 2 novellas that's set in the same universe as The Last Unicorn story, which I absolutely love. And while I admit I don't think it's as good as the original novel, it was still nice to spend time in the world and see some of the original characters. And I gotta say that as a book, as a physical piece of work, this is a really lovely hardcover edition with a really cute pink cover, and it does work really nicely with the new edition of The Last Unicorn. And finally for fantasy, I want to talk about Castle Serpent by Jacqueline Carey. This is a new book all set in the Kushal Dart universe, and I really love the original trilogy. Had more mixed, mild feelings about the later companion books, but I'm excited for this one. It's going to kind of retell the story from a different perspective, Jocelyn's perspective specifically, and I'm really excited to go back to that. So high hopes for this one. I don't believe it comes out until I want to say August, so it's going to be a little bit until I actually review it, but I'm having trouble holding off. I might have to read it myself really early and then just pre-record something, because I don't know if I can hold off that long. And then finally, I want to show the strangest book I've ever received for review. I was shocked when this came in the mail. I'm incredibly grateful, but I fully admit that I'm not the target audience as a reviewer, and that is The Amazing Spider-Man Beyond. This is a full collection. It's all full color art of the Spider-Man Beyond universe, and I am just not someone who is really familiar with the ins and outs of the latest Marvel, but this book is gorgeous. If you're a collector, if you're a fan, this is beautiful. The artwork is stunning, and I would like to read through this, but it's going to take me a while. I don't read and review a lot of superhero novels or ever, but this book showed up in the mail unsolicited. I kind of wonder if it's a mistake, but I don't want the marketers to tell me that, because I was just stunned to receive this. And I do want to check it out. My son also loves Spider-Man and wants to read it, but I'm pretty sure it's very adult, so might not be a book that we read together. But yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. What a surprise. Incredibly heavy, and something totally different than what I normally expect to see it coming in the mail. So that's it for this video here. I'd love to know, of the books I talked about, which ones are you planning on checking out for yourself? And I'd also love to hear if you have any strategies, how you plan and prioritize when you're spending money on books. I've really started to give a lot of thought to what I'm spending money on, and just trying to avoid more buyer's regret. So when I do buy books, I try to look back and see which ones were mistakes and which ones am I really grateful that I bought. Because while I don't think that I ever should go on a book ban, I do want to start buying books smarter, and I think about doing a follow-up video on that if you're interested to know more about how I strategize and plan my book buying. Otherwise, if you're new to my channel, I do read a lot of horror, thriller, science fiction, fantasy, basically what you saw here, plus a Spider-Man book. And if you want to help me out with this video, you can subscribe, you can give me a thumbs up, you can drop a comment, even if it's just a little emoji like a stack of books. And if you hit that little notification bell, you'll never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.